Good morning. We're back. And I have a question for you today, Tom. I have been asked multiple times recently about virtualizing the business, virtualizing someone's business, moving everything to the cloud, and the pros and cons of that, or the latter side of that of keeping it all local, like everyone has really been doing for years. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I was in the business long enough, say 30 some odd years ago, that it was known as the cloud approach, right? Virtualizing everything. It was actually called application service provider, which meant you would virtualize either the entire desktop, put the desktops in the cloud, or you would just virtualize applications and the applications would reside in the cloud. And it was common at that time to use the Citrix technology because Microsoft's basically Citrix was doing terminal services better than Microsoft was doing it. They had a patent and they had a deal with Microsoft, and it had more capabilities than what Microsoft themselves could do. So it gave you abilities to do load balancing and all of this kind of stuff. And that kind of, the internet wasn't as rich and reliable as it was, nowadays, or it is nowadays. It's much more reliable and a lot bigger pipeline, or a lot more bandwidth, right? And even though virtualized desktops and server instances, they don't really require that much bandwidth for the connection. But back 30 years ago, we were still dealing with locations that was still using dial-up internet, and that just wasn't good enough. So way ahead of our time. And the .com bust basically killed that ASP industry off. Now we just know it as cloud services, or VDI, virtual desktop. The I stands for interface or something, I don't know. But it's the idea behind it is theoretically, and keep in mind, I'm agnostic on either hybrid, on-prem, cloud. I'm totally agnostic because there's pros and cons to all of them. And as you know, we're not virtual, right? No. We went to nothing but laptops, and everybody's got a docking station, and everybody takes their laptop with them. So that way, if you wake up and you don't feel good, but you feel good enough to do some work, you've got your computer with you. And some of us have big monitors at home and external keyboards, but if you go into the office, it's just as if you have a full-blown desktop. You got that kind of power. We don't cheap out on our technology investment. It costs us too much money to nickel and dime things. And I think that probably the oldest laptop in the office is 2 years, and they're all M chips from Apple. They're high performance, much higher performance than what they were achieving with Intel. So we're way ahead of the curve from a performance perspective. So we probably won't have to worry about replacing them for another year, probably. But getting back to the topic, this misconception that because it's in the cloud, it's more secure, it's safer, and it never goes down. Well, cloud providers go down. Okay. It doesn't happen as much as it for on premises. The stats tell us that it's a fact. If you go to AWS or Azure, and maybe the Google stuff, whatever it's called, these cloud provider, even our own infrastructure, of course, ours has never gone down, but even our own infrastructure is super reliable. So the downage is caused if your internet goes down, right? Those of you that have voice over IP telephone systems know exactly what I'm talking about. Your internet goes down, your phones go down. But going to the security part of this deal, I have heard cloud providers actually tell clients that they're providing an entirely virtualized environment, desktop servers, everything's in a big data center somewhere. And they brag about massive amounts of uptime and how many redundant internet connections they have and redundant power. And ours is our data center is one of the best in the world. It's just incredible. They just don't go down. But when it comes to security, cloud providers will actually tell their clients that you don't have to worry about security because it's in the cloud. You don't have to worry about endpoint protection on the desktops because it's in the cloud. Now, here's the catch. Those infrastructures, ours included, is super, super, super secure. But the moment you start installing Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Office, all of your line of business applications, everything that you use to do your work, they have vulnerabilities. And it doesn't change the security profile as opposed to being inside your building and on your desktop. They still have to have EDR protection that we've talked about. Many of them still have to have, and I would argue they even more important that they have this tool called a SIEM that analyzes logs for devices like switches and routers and anything that's connected to the internet to look for potential intrusions. And so the misnomer or the myth that just because you're in the AWS environment, Amazon Web Services, which is really, really secure by itself, the moment you start using those infrastructures for something else, the weaker it gets because of the applications that are putting on there, because users create 95% of the breaches. And a friend of mine got a pretty good sized insurance company, and his cloud provider told him that he had virtualized everything. Cloud provider told him that, and lo and behold, about a year later, they got a ransomware attack, and it affected a lot of the service providers' clients.
Starting at the endpoint level, is that correct?
Exactly. It was a typical ransomware attack. It's modern technology that's designed to evade detection, but they didn't have any endpoint security at all. Because even they believed that just because they were in the cloud, that it was more secure. They didn't really have to worry about security. And we recently got a pretty good sized client that their service provider had told them the exact same thing. And during our initial calls, that came up. And the first thing we said, well, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And you've got to have EDR on there on all the endpoints. It doesn't change just because it's in a cloud. The cloud is not inherently more secure once you begin putting it in production. Now, the other pros and cons, if you're in the cloud, you pretty much don't have to worry about buying hardware anymore, or at least a lot less hardware over a period of time. But now there's a price to be paid for that. You're shifting your IT and security investment from in your building, which you still have to worry about security, to the cloud, to the data center. So you do get some benefits when it comes to total cost of ownership or return on an investment and things like that. But there is a price to be paid for it, and reliability of your own internet connection, the reliability of any remote workers that you have, their internet connection, those impact productivity. If it just happen to be in just got a bad internet connection, they've only got one service provider and they're stuck with it, or you certainly don't want to look at using satellite internet. It's until Starlink is widely available. The traditional satellite stuff's got too much latency. It's not fast enough. And those are just some of the things. And so when we looked at that environment, especially as we went into COVID and had everybody working remotely, we decided that we wanted to go to laptops, and we wanted to go to Macs because Macs do a better job of plugging and unplugging from docking stations. They just seem to work. And maybe that's different now for Windows boxes, but when I used to run a Windows machine, and I did for 30 plus years, I always tried that, and it was always glitchy. You'd have to reboot a lot more whenever you pulled it off the docking station or plugged it into the docking station. And it's been our experience that that's simply not the case with Macs. They just seem to just work a whole lot better. So right now, as we're doing this, I'm on a 49-inch monitor. My laptop screen is closed. It's in a little cradle, and there's one USB cord going out of it into a docking station. And I've got microphones, and I don't even know. There's probably a good 10 or 15 devices connected to it. Printer, scanner, just all sorts of things. So I guess what the ultimate deal is if you haven't gone to the cloud, I would really encourage you to try it. Speak to somebody that's got experience in both environments, not just your line of business specialty service provider that just says the cloud's great, because that's what they've got to sell, right? And that's what they're going to tell you. And they're not intentionally misleading you, because I'm a huge believer in the technology and going to the cloud and everything. But in our personal case, I believe it was more cost effective to do what we did.
Yeah.
Now, all of our documents are in the cloud, our mail servers in the cloud, our phone systems are in the cloud. There's really, we have one server still in the office, but we really don't need it. But your situation's unique. Most of you that are listening are going to have a Windows environment. You probably still want to have a server to do security authentication on the local area network. And maybe you want to keep your files local, so you're not, getting bandwidth charges and overages and things like that. But it's not a one size fits all. On-prem is wrong for some people. Cloud is wrong for some people. Hybrid. Yeah, I think there's an HP commercial, should I stay or should I go is the song that's on, they play. And they go, well, we can do it hybrid. We can be here and in the cloud. Well, now you got replication of data issues that making it more complicated. I don't think we have anyone that is doing any sort of hybrid environment. We've got replication happening, but it's all inside the data center. But just keep in mind that when somebody tells you it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, that there are cons to going all the way to the cloud, as just as there are cons in going or staying on premises.
So what I've taken for this and for listeners is a quick review. There are pros and cons from staying local, keeping everything on-prem, but also moving things to the cloud. And it's really not one size fits all. We would recommend talking it over with your IT provider. And if you're needing answers, or you have questions that aren't being answered, of course, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to talk to you about what would be the best fit for you. But with whatever you do, always think about the security side of things. If you do move everything to the cloud is protecting. It has your security, or it has security, but you can't forget to protect your endpoint, because if your endpoints are breached or if they're not secure, then it doesn't matter if everything's in the cloud.
That whole cloud infrastructure is going to get infected. That's what's going to happen because of a user clicking on a malicious file attachment.
That's exactly
and if it doesn't have any protection there, it's free range, and it'd be catastrophic.
That's exactly right. Well, we talked about the pros and cons today. Thank you all for listening. And we will, in another piece, talk about, if you do want to move everything to the cloud or virtualize everything, how do you make that happen? That'll be another piece. Make sure to tune in, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.